peaceful, healthy day wherever you are. And today, because it's Monday, the 3rd of November, 2024, that means we are 2 days out from from the upcoming presidential election in the United States. And as that is a very, I would say, kind of contentious or heavily charged or dramatic or emotional election at the moment, with a lot of kind of mean-spirited vitriol flying back and forth between the most hyped up people on either side of the political divide. I just kind of wanted to remind you of a few things. And yeah, the title of what I initially called the video is Lessons in Loss, or Lessons of Loss. And yes, the acronym is LOL. I may even change the title at some point. I don't know. See. But the point is not just that. Although there certainly are lessons of loss, and they are important to remember. And I'll go over them with you throughout this video, interspersed here and there without even necessarily mentioning them. Like identifying what they specifically are. I'll let you figure that out. Maybe. But the point is of this video that you got to remember, okay, especially if you're in a place that has a very contentious election coming up and you happen to identify strongly with one side or the other, either because you like the policies of a particular party or you like the person of a particular party, okay? Doesn't matter, or both. Maybe you like both. Maybe you dislike both. So you were opposed to that policy or person or both. Well, just remember, if you happen to have the freedom to choose who represents you in government, that's already a big freedom. And there's a process, as long as there's a process where you get to keep having that right and you get to keep choosing different candidates over the years, even if you want to choose the same local congressman or senator or whatever you call your parliamentarian, wherever you're from. Hello to the person saying hello. Hello. As long as you have the right to vote, the right to choose your political leadership, you should cherish that right. And be glad that it's a civil right and one that is kept firm by peaceful means, meaning people may agree or disagree on issues, but they settle their differences at the ballot box. They don't settle their differences with bullet boxes, right? Now, I know that may seem kind of obvious to most reasonable people, but as the populace becomes more and more divided because it pigeonholes itself into echo chambers thanks to divisive technologies like so-called social media, which are not at all social. In fact, they're anti-social media, right? I've long said that X and Facebook and other things like it, but particularly X, is the most anti-social technology that's ever existed. And right now, X is really the most anti-social platform. And I mean that algorithmically. I'm not even talking about the politics, because you can be in whatever echo chamber there that you want. Of course, there's a certain right lean at the moment on X, because the owner of X, Elon Musk, is obviously very, pro right wing or pro Donald Trump or whatever. He obviously, pushes the heck out of that narrative, but Facebook also very right-leaning. If you look at the overall percentage of which stories actually get impressions and views and all that, and it's been that way for many, many years. It has to do with the nature of the content. Okay, the nature of the content on conservative media has always been fear, etc. And I'm not saying this to trash on conservative politics at all. This isn't the point of this video. Okay, liberal content, I could just as easily say has been, they use fear of a different kind. Okay, they use it too, though. Okay, they both use it, and they both get a lot of reach. And we can quibble about the data. It's irrelevant to the point of the discussion. The point of the discussion is to make sure that you remember whatever the outcome is of an election that you had the freedom to vote in, along with your fellow citizens. You should really cherish the fact that you had that freedom and that you still have it after the election. And you should do whatever you can to preserve that right, regardless of whether or not the person you vote for, is somebody whose policies you agree with entirely or not. What is more important to you? Right? As a civilian member of the population, or maybe you're not a civilian, as a member of your population, what is more important to you? That a politician at this moment in time favors a certain policy that may benefit you a little bit, or that the politician you vote for preserves the entire kind of country in terms of government format that you live in. Meaning, if you live in a democracy where you have the right to vote, does it matter to you that your politician also supports democracy through his or her actions? To me, it's a no-brainer. Do I want somebody whose policies favor my opinion in this moment, even if I know that they can be changed on a dime by somebody giving them a nice compliment or offering them a nice contract? Or do I want somebody who's going to resolutely stand for the principles of the democracy into which I was born, and have the privilege of being a citizen with the right to vote and speak my mind and all that? It's kind of a no-brainer, right? But then again, anybody can always look at it from a different angle, which is fine. As long as you look at it peacefully and don't incite violence and don't take up arms against your fellow citizens because you don't like the outcome of an election. Okay? That is not okay. That is the line which cannot be crossed. The moment that people are so dissatisfied with an election that they take up arms against their brothers and sisters just to express their anger, then you don't really have what you think you have anymore. Right? A republic, as long as we can keep it, you're not going to have a republic if you're taking up arms against each other. You're not going to have a democracy if you're taking up arms against each other. Whatever disagreement one may have, I don't care what side it is, whatever disagreement one side may have with the other or with the process, well, there's a process for taking care of that. Right? There are lessons to learn, both in victory and in defeat, right? in winning and in losing. There is a lot to be learned. Graciousness. Right? If you lose graciously, if you have grace under pressure, if you concede defeat, that is a cornerstone of transferring power peacefully. Concede defeat. And just to wish whoever wins, to wish them congratulations, or to congratulate them, and to wish them success for the entire nation or for their entire jurisdiction, if it's a more local election, or for the entire state they live in, or whatever. No. And if you live in a war zone, like I am now, you need to get to cover sometimes very, very quickly. And so here I am, to cover very, very quickly. I don't know if you can hear that. Those are spot here or something. Let's go. Okay. All right, thanks. Okay. Anyway, I will catch up with you guys soon. Waiting for 10 minutes to pass now, so after that's over, maybe I'll continue what I was saying. So, yeah, that'll do it for now. See you. Once you go ahead and ask, and I'll answer them if I can. Hopefully it'll never be like this where you are, if you're waiting for an election, victory outcome or loss outcome or whatever. Hope you don't have to run to a bomb shelter. It's absolutely nuts. Literally just walking around outside. Got into a bomb shelter. Why? Some crazy people can't accept loss. They can't accept being the losers of the kinetic conflict that they started. And the more they're being defeated, the less they have to fire. So the more they fire, because they realize they don't have probably a lot of time left before most of their kinetic ability is gone. So what do? They just start launching. Over the last month, I can't even tell you how many dozens of times I've had to, over the last week as well, and just over the last couple days, it's been nonstop. Why? Well, because they don't learn the lessons of loss. Right? They're raised in cultures where they're taught never to admit defeat, even when it's clear that they did lose. Even when they're the aggressor and everything, it doesn't matter. They're taught to not admit defeat because of ideology, which is one of the worst things that any person can do, really. It's quite terrible. So, you know, that's why we have the conflicts that we have, as long as we have them. And what people call forever wars and stuff. And you're literally spending time for years on end in a forever war. Many years, I can tell you, it's insane that these wars last forever. Partly it's because of the leadership on all sides. Because very much it has to do with the leadership that has financial interests in prolonging conflict, and that exists on pretty much every conflict. But it also has to do with ideologies and the decision to not accept defeat and make peace with your enemies. You know, that's what happens when one side is genocidal and refuses to surrender. At least in the 1940s, the Germans and the Japanese accepted surrender. They surrendered, and then they made peace with their previous enemies. The problem today is the warring parties. Unfortunately, the aggressor does not want peace. They don't want that at all. They would rather there never be peace. They just want to fight until the end of the earth. That's their ideology. They're genocidal freaks. So,
אני, בשביל השלוש דקות האלה, לא לוקחת סיכון. הבת שלי עם הרכב, תתנפץ לשמשה אחורה, ליד הקריון. ליד הקריון.
תראי, אני גדלתי בנעל"ה. החיים שלו משתנים ברגע שיש ילדים. אני, כשלא היו לי ילדים, לא נדבר עליהם. כאילו?
אבל לא לקחת סיכון.
יאללה, לכאן.
אז עברתם לגור פה.
לא, אנחנו גרנו בנרקיס, אנחנו כבר מפה קראו.
גם בנרקיס.
גרנו בנרקיסים, ואז אמרו שזה
אז עכשיו אתם בביתה. אז למה כפר ביאליק?
זה הגן של הכפר ביאליק.
ובגבעת דהרה?
יש גן מאוד טוב בכפר ביאליק, של סגל.
anyway, guys, if you have any questions or whatever about what I'm doing, feel free to ask. If not, I will catch you guys. I'm actually going to get out of here in a few minutes, maybe less. We'll see. I don't imagine this is going to be captivating to anyone. So I guess I'll call you guys, catch you guys later. Alright, seems the time has passed, so we can leave. Alright. Oh. Well, there you go. Another example of what it's like to live under fire. Sometimes you just have to interrupt whatever you're doing, go take shelter. In this case, I went into the shelter of some random building I was walking by. And of course, you know, nobody's going to refuse anyone from coming in, obviously. Right? It's a matter of public safety. Everyone was allowed to go into any bomb shelter to be protected from the bombs or the UAVs or the rockets or the missiles or whatever, the mortar fire. And again, all this because our enemies, when I say our, I mean people here in Israel, we have enemies, obviously. The ones who are shooting at us refuse to accept defeat because they are genocidal bastards. That's a technical term. And when I say they, I mean the terrorists specifically. I don't mean, for example, those most likely were ordnance complaint cylinders coming at us from the north in Lebanon. But it's not all the Lebanese people who are shooting at us, right? It's specifically the people in the Hezbollah terrorist organization, which is a terrorist organization backed by Iran. Hezbollah is not democratic. Yes, Hezbollah has politicians inside the Lebanese government because why not? They figured, hey, let's take advantage of the democracy that we live in. And so they did. They took over control of significant portions of the Lebanese political system. And by force, they basically have the largest military force, if you will, in the whole country. So they're effectively the force majeure of the country, right? They're by far more powerful than the so-called Lebanese army. Right? It's the Hezbollah as their army. So the Lebanese army, effectively Hezbollah, but not what they call the Lebanese army. That's a joke. It's like 20,000 people, and yes, they get hundreds of millions of dollars a year to operate separately from Hezbollah, but half of them or more actually moonlight in Hezbollah. Like, no joke. After 5 p.m., they take off their uniform, they put on their Hezbollah uniform, and they go do terrorist stuff. Right? So, all that Lebanon, and where do they, who trains them? The U.S. trains them. The U.S. gives them weapons. And at the same time, those same exact people that they train and give weapons to be Lebanese army soldiers, they take off their clothes at 5 p.m., their Lebanese army clothes, or whatever, on weekends or whatever, and they go and join the Hezbollah ranks in their spare time. They're not even joking, right? It reminds me of in Somalia, right? When the U.S. was in Somalia back in the early 90s. I had a cousin there who was being protected because he worked for the UN. He was being protected by his bodyguards that he was paying to protect him while he was, at work, going to and from work, and while he was there the whole day. And they would protect him from the morning. They'd come pick him up, bring him to work, protect him all day, make sure he got home safely. The moment the clock turned, whatever it was, 5 o'clock or whatever, they would literally go from being his bodyguards to being people that would shoot at him. Like, not even a joke. They would literally, his bodyguards would shoot at him. And he had to have U.S. soldiers, eliminate multiple bodyguards of his. Right? They were sworn to protect him, and they protected him during their on-duty hours. But when they were off duty, no, they were terrorists who were sworn to kill him because of jihad and whatever other nonsense. Non-democratic ideological hatred. Pretty much the source of most of our problems in the world at the moment. And that isn't anti-Islam or anything. I mean, you could say the same thing about the Socialist Democrat, the National Socialist Democrats of Germany in the 1930s. They called themselves Democrats. They weren't very democratic. They voted one time for one guy who wanted to be a dictator, and he was, until he was no longer alive. So that kind of crap I'm not into. I like countries where democracy matters and votes matter, and where your ability to keep voting in the future matters. I don't like the idea of giving up the right to vote for anyone who's a citizen. Okay, obviously, convicted felons, people who've done high crimes, whatever, yeah, sure, they can have their votes. You know, depending on whether or not they were rehab or not, these things all make a difference. And I would say that every single convict necessarily can never vote again. But maybe. I'm not a judge, not a lawyer. I just like to think that usually there are exceptions under the law. And so maybe it's not okay to give such ham-handed decisions as maybe that is the right thing to do, because it's a good warning to people. Like, if you are a convicted felon, you lose your right to vote. And that's, hopefully that's a big deterrent that does actually keep people from committing crime. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it actually doesn't help to deter people from committing crime, because look at the United States. It still has one of the highest crime rates in the world. It doesn't have the highest crime rate in the world. Like, crime has generally gone down, according to the FBI statistics over the years. But it doesn't mean it's one of the most peaceful places on earth. By far not, right? Anyone can acknowledge the U.S. has a lot of crime. So it's a matter of how much crime are people willing to put up with, but also, are the policies that the U.S. uses actually effective? Right? I can't actually answer that question fully in terms of whether or not things like banning certain people from voting is really an effective method of policing and preventing crime. Okay? Does it have an effect? Yeah, probably does have an effect. Is it extremely effective? Probably not. But in any case, folks, I really just wanted to, make this video to remind you all that you're blessed enough, fortunate enough to live in a country where you have the right to vote. Okay. For example, if you're in the U.S. this Tuesday and the election results come in, and you don't, or if you're not even in the U.S., but you're an American overseas, for an example, it could be any country, any election, but there's one happening that everybody knows about this Tuesday. Whatever the result is, don't get upset. Please, I implore you. Or if you get upset, more importantly, don't be physical with your anger. Please, do not turn your anger into kinetic anger. You could be upset in your heart. You could be sad in your heart. You could be frustrated or mad or whatever. But remember that maintaining peace in a democracy and maintaining the right to vote in the future to change whatever you don't like by peaceful means is more important and worth far more, in my opinion, than whatever policy you may agree or disagree with, right? And I don't care. Again, I'm not going to tell you who to vote for. I'm not going to tell you who I voted for, or I'm going to vote for, anything like that. It's a message to all people who live in any democracy, especially a message to my fellow Americans right now. I implore you to stay peaceful. You do not want to live in the ravages of civil strife and civil war, God forbid, let alone wars with foreign enemies constantly shooting at your cities and towns. Okay? I don't care what your policy beliefs are. I don't care if you think we should ban every foreigner from ever entering the country again or not. I mean, you know, what my beliefs are may differ entirely from you on that. But I don't care enough to just say, well, then we should fight a war about it. No, we should preserve peace about it and hash out our differences at the ballot box and have our legislators duke it out in Congress legislatively, not physically. They should politic for their positions. They could fundraise, campaign, run ads, whatever. But we've seen the level of dialogue descend dramatically from the standards where it was just not even a decade ago. Okay? The entire language of politics has completely changed compared to where it was like literally a decade ago, 9 years ago. Okay? I mean, if you don't know that, then you don't know politics since more than 9 years. Because I can tell you, before 9 years ago, politics was nothing like it is today in America and in many other countries around the world, by the way, which followed the American example very closely. And some, by the way, which were ahead of the American example and which the American example mimicked very quickly. If you don't believe me, look at the UK. The UK actually beat the US to the punch when it came to doing that. People forget that. But the US took it to a whole new level because of obvious reasons. So I'm not here to tell you that one side did this or the other side did that. I'm really not. Okay? I agree and disagree with people on all sides of every aisle. Okay? I agree and disagree on many issues with my Republican friends, my Democrat friends, my Libertarian friends, my Independent friends, anybody, even people who aren't friends. I have differing opinions. Okay? So I don't put myself in a distribution parabola, even though I'm sure some statisticians would love to do that. What I do think of myself as is a human being and a citizen of various democracies. And to me, being a citizen of a democracy where I have the right to vote is far more important to me than whatever issue we might quibble over, which we can resolve through the democratic process. And to use such extreme language to say, oh, the country is going to go to heck if we do this. It's going to be immediately a disaster if we do that. Do you know how many years I've been hearing that? How many decades I've been hearing that? Only it's gotten worse in the last decade. Far, far worse. I heard we were going to be a communist country when Obama came to power. I heard we were going to be a fascist state when, George W. Bush came to power. I heard that we were going to be, what do you call it? Just, socialist nightmare when Bill Clinton came to power. I heard that if, Reagan was going to come to power in 88 again, if he can be reelected again, that it would be like America would be like this, crazy nationalist state, and we wouldn't be able to ever have peace with the Russians, and it'll be a World War III. None of these things happened. In fact, the opposite of most of these things exactly what happened. So whatever, when Trump was elected the first time, people said, oh, it's going to be like the Nazis. It wasn't like the Nazis. When Biden came to power, they said, oh, it's going to be a communist country with a Great Depression. There was no Great Depression. There was no communism. People say words without even understanding the meaning of them. Okay, I don't want to sound mean, because that's not the point of this. But people are very low information when it comes to politics. And I don't mean that in a mean way. I mean, people are busy with their lives, so they don't have time to consume all the little details of what happens in politics. So they just hear the loudmouths who say the buzzwords, and they get the headlines. That's all they hear. Oh, I don't want that. Oh, I want that. I prefer this to that. Okay. If you don't have the time to learn even the slightest bit, forget nuance, but of difference in what people say versus what they mean versus what they do, then I don't know how important democracy is to you if you live in a democracy and you can't be bothered to learn anything about the political system or the politicians that are campaigning where you live. It's kind of important whether you like it or not. Now, does it affect you necessarily directly? No, not necessarily, right? It may never affect you directly if you're fortunate enough to not be affected by it directly. But there are a lot of people who will usually be affected by it directly, especially when it comes to things like presidential elections. So anyway, and again, when I say low information voters, I don't mean like you're dumb or something. No, I don't mean that at all. Like, not at all. That's not what it means. If you think that, think again. Being a low information voter just means you haven't consumed a lot of high level information or a high level or a high amount of high quality information about a particular election or campaign or politicians. That's all it means. It has nothing to do with your intellectual capacity at all. So please don't take it the wrong way. But there are too many low information voters in places like the United States who really don't care about politics, which is fine, but then stop being so dramatic about it. And they make decisions and they get all hyped up and they become, members of a circus clown show without actually knowing what they're talking about. And they get very stubborn about it, despite their lack of knowledge. So I find that quite fascinating, and I think it's something that's very, very telling of a lot of people in the world who like to have a very strong opinion without actually knowing what they're talking about. So to me, it's more important to know about a topic, a strong opinion about. I spent many decades of my years on this earth, so pretty much every one of my decades, even from the time I was a child, politics has been part of my life, whether I liked it or not, in a significant way. Nevertheless, I don't always express my opinions about everything, right? And there's reasons for that. One of the main somehow has all the answers. We are more capable of learning and achieving better results and a better status quo than if we have a non-democratic process. Does that mean that the democratic process is perfect or better than all others? Not necessarily. It's certainly not perfect. And it may not necessarily be better than all the others. But it's better than all the others that I actually know of. And listen, I say that as a person who kind of half as a joke back in like 1990, 91, 90, 91, something like that, in one of my about constitutional monarchy, democratic monarchy, right? Where, I had to present a perspective, whether I agreed with it or not. It does happen that I did kind of agree with certain parts of it. I thought it was kind of the professor, made a point of highlighting my paper because he thought it was novel enough to do so. He presented it to the class on my behalf, asked me to present it to the class to explain it, what I meant, and the ins and outs. And he held it up as, oh, this is an interesting, this is how you come up with a thesis like this, or, a theory like this. He wasn't suggesting that we do that, that kind of government. He was just saying, this is how you create this kind of theory. Well, time passes, and America has arrived at a place, for example, where both sides can say, even though you could say, well, they're not the same, both sides can say legitimately that they fear that that's what's going to happen, even if it's not true. They both make the argument. Even if one side is projecting more than the other, it doesn't matter. Both sides can say it and do say it. If the other side wins, democracy ends. Democracy is over. No. Democracy only ends when people are unwilling to stay peaceful about the process of governance. And that starts at the top. And it goes all the way down to the bottom in the political tree, right? Starts with the leaders. If the leaders aren't willing to be peaceful, Lord knows that they can do things that will end up badly for people all the way down the tree. All the way, all the way, all the way. We've already seen it happen. And I'm not saying one side or the other. And I'm not comparing different events. But we've seen it happen where political leaders in certain countries, including the United States and other countries, have said certain things that have led people to do violent things. And I'm not naming any politician or political party. Somebody asked me where I'm from. Mahdi Karabi. Where am I from? Yo, I'm an American and other things. That's where I'm from originally. I am not there now, though. I'm in a place where there's a lot of rockets flying at me all the time. Mahdi Karabi. Where are you from? So yeah, I hope you all stay peaceful. And like I said, whatever happens tomorrow, no, Tuesday, 2 days from now in the US, I hope that you and all of our fellow citizens accept whatever the outcome is, whether the person that wins the election we're concerned about is the side we want or not, whether it's the side I want or the side you want or whoever, whether you like the outcome or not, whether I like the outcome or not. And it's the same way every election, but for some reason, I wonder what that reason is. And it should be kind of obvious why I feel that necessity, if you are an astute observer of American politics. But if you're not, well, let me just say that right now, American politics is very, very emotionally supercharged. And if you look on any social media platform where there's political discussions, you see the vitriol. You see the anger, the hatred, the threats, the disgusting language people throw at each other. Honestly, I'm tired of it. Who isn't? Who wants to see that kind of garbage? There's nothing pleasant about it. Even if you agree with the person that's saying the nasty things, do you agree with the nasty way they say it? Really? Do you consider that to be the proper way to be? I don't. You're from South Australia. Hey, South Australia. Welcome aboard. I am in Israel at the moment. I have friends in South Australia. Give them my regards. And tell the Joeys that they're cute. To everybody else who doesn't know what a Joey is, in Australia, they refer to little kangaroos as Joeys. And I know kangaroos are just giant rodents. I know. And when they get big, they can be quite dangerous. I know. I'm fully aware. We got kangaroos here, by the way, in a park not very far from me. In fact, I used to live really, really close to it. Now a bit further away, but still close enough. And yeah, they can be quite the badasses, as they say, right? Very buff. From all the, I don't know what they're doing with their arms, building up their muscles on their chest and stuff. I guess all that jumping around. I don't know what. They get to be quite tough looking. But yeah. Anyway, kangaroos. So that's my only commentary for the day about this particular topic, at least as far as I know. I don't think I'm going to say anything else about this until after the elections in the US are over. Maybe I won't even comment about that. I really don't like to talk about politics too much on this channel, precisely because it's so divisive. And I'd rather talk about things that are less divisive generally, but occasionally there's something I just gotta say. And I've seen so much divisiveness in recent weeks and months, and really the last few years. And, it's all just political theater. You got to remember, you're just playing into the hands of the people running the theater. And you may not believe that's how it goes, but my opinion, as somebody who has worked in Washington, D.C. and in politics directly for years and years and years, somebody who's, I've worked Congress and I've worked the White House and I've worked all kinds of politicians and their ilk, their staff and all that. The process of the sausage making is very much theater, and the language being selectively chosen to disseminate through things like social media is not an accident on any side of the aisle. They're fully aware, 100% cognizant of what they're doing and saying. If they weren't, would you really want those people to be in office in the first place? Right? And we've seen what kind of problems it leads to when candidates are not fully aware. So with that said, my friends, I hope you learn the lessons of loss. And whether your candidate wins or loses, you accept the outcome peacefully. And know that you can always work peacefully towards bettering the country or state or district or whatever that you live in peacefully through a peaceful democratic process. And it shouldn't make you think that I'm some kind of hippie who never believes in using force. I live in a country right now where, like I said, I'm in Israel right now, and we use a lot of force because we don't have a choice, because if we didn't, then the enemies that are shooting things at us would literally wipe us all out if they could. They say it constantly. That's what they want to do. And we got a lot of people who are crazy that way shooting things at us. None of them live in a democracy. All of them are projecting their anger by scapegoating Jews in Israel and blaming us for all their problems instead of looking in the mirror and saying, maybe it's our own leaders who are messing up. They're not giving us the freedoms and rights that we deserve. They're not giving us the economic opportunity that we deserve. They're not giving our kids the education they deserve. They're not giving us the health care we deserve. So they just blame the Jews and shoot things at us because that's what they've been taught to do since generations. Again, they're low IQ people, not as intelligence goes, but they're low information when it comes to the topic at hand. I don't blame them for it necessarily, except their leaders who obviously know better. I don't blame them, the average person in like Yemen who's a member of the Houthis, because he has to be, or otherwise he doesn't get to bring home food for the week. I don't blame them even for trying to shoot a rocket at us like a bunch of imbeciles. Yeah, I wish they would stop. And yeah, I approve of Israel doing whatever it has to defend itself against that kind of nonsense, including recruiting help from the United States or any other ally that's willing, like the UK or France or whoever that's willing to help shoot down their income ordinance as it travels across the Red Sea. I'm willing and supportive of Israel and the US and France and Britain and other nations, Australia, defending ships going through the Red Sea to not be taken hostage by these idiot pirates from Yemen. I'm supportive of the force that Israel uses to fight against the Hamas, because if we didn't, they would continually attack us to kill all of us, as they've said many times since before October 7th and on October 7th and since October 7th, and the hostages they keep in Gaza. Of course I support using force against them. Of course I also support diplomatic efforts to end the fighting. But if they're not willing, and they have not been willing, to stop the fighting, to accept defeat, to surrender like every other nation in the world that's ever lost a war and had to accept it, well then no. We need to do whatever we can to end their stupid existence so that they stop being a problem. I don't want that to be the outcome. I wish they would come to their senses, but they've proven time and again they're unwilling to, and they're proving it again right now. And we're still giving them the chance. We're still saying, hey, hello, if you surrender, if you give us hostages, we will basically grant you clemency. We'll not end you as a person. We're going to end your organization. We're not going to end you as a person. And they still refuse. They still keep fighting. People have offered them rewards, hundreds of thousands, even millions of dollars of rewards, just to release some hostages. They're not going to do it. They have been brainwashed for generations by organizations like the UN, which allows dictators to have the same voice as leaders of democracies, right? They allow dictatorships to have equal representation as democracies. Therefore, the United Nations is not democratic because it allows dictators to run things like the Human Rights Council and to create things like the United Nations Relief Works Agency, which has become a terrorist organization. Literally, the United Nations has created a terrorist organization which helped Hamas attack Israel on October 7th. The United Nations is supposed to be a democratic body. It is not. If you allow dictators, tyrants, terrorists to rule the roost over any part of your organization, you're not a democracy. The United Nations is not a democracy. It's not a democratic institution. It pretends to be. It was founded with that ideal, but it has quickly descended into not being that at all because of the fact that it allows so many dictators and tyrants and terrorists to actually run what goes on at the UN. It's that simple. You might not like to hear it, but it's a fact, right? The UN is a non-democratic organization that is host to and creator of a terrorist organization, UNRWA, which Israel finally banned from being and operating inside of Israel last week. And within 3 months, I think that goes into effect. And then also they can't communicate, UNRWA and Israel's government can't communicate directly anymore after that ban goes into effect. And the UN is freaking out about it. How dare you block a United Nations agency for humanitarian aid? Hey, listen, they're not blocking you, UNRWA, from operating inside of Gaza, Judea, or Samaria. Israel did a very democratic thing and decided that a terrorist organization that attacked it on October 7th and has committed atrocities against the Palestinian people and the Israeli people every day since October 7th, including keeping hostages in the homes of UNRWA staff, they don't get to participate in Israel anymore. They never helped Israelis anyway. They don't provide food or relief to Israelis. They don't provide food or relief to Jews who aren't Israelis, who are refugees, because there aren't any Jewish refugees in 2024 in Israel or in Europe or the United States. You know why? Because they've been absorbed. After World War II, all the Jews who were refugees were absorbed into one country or the other within a very short period of years. Because that's the point of refugee agencies, is to absorb the refugees so that they're no longer refugees. But UNRWA does not operate in that way. They operate the exact opposite way. Not only do they continue to prolong the existence of the refugees, they hand the refugee status down from one generation to the next, even after their parents and grandparents have already been settled into those countries now for a generation or two or three or four, and they're already completely citizens of that country in every way, shape, or form, but they also happen to carry a refugee status from a country that they've never been to because their great-grandparents once left a house because one of their leaders told them to leave so our soldiers can kill the Jews and destroy all of Israel, and then you can come back and take all their houses too. That's the kind of psychopath belief that UNRWA operates built off of. And because of that, through generations of teaching children hatred of Jews and Israelis, they refuse to learn the lessons of loss. They got in bed completely with Hamas. They got in bed completely with Hezbollah, by the way, because UNRWA is also in Lebanon and Syria and Jordan. Right? They're not just in Gaza and Judea and Samaria. They're also in the neighboring countries. They incited hatred and violence against Israel and the Jews. And UNRWA is a terrorist organization. There's no doubt about it. It's been proven multiple times. And people go, Israel's never shown any evidence. No, they've literally shown evidence and tons of it. And the only people that say that it's not evidence are apologists who are not willing to admit defeat either. And you know exactly who I'm talking about, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks and other people like that. And yes, I named him specifically. This isn't a video about him. But there are people like that throughout the media who say and do disgusting things when it comes to the Israel policy. Even if I may agree with people like that on some other issues about progressive ideas or whatever. All right? I don't agree with them at all about Israel and the issue with the Arabs that are still in conflict with Israel. But I'm not pretending to be, I'm neutral about it. No, I'm not neutral about it. I'm objective, but I'm not neutral. I have a bias. I make that very clear. I obviously support a democracy to dictatorships run by ideological, psychopathic, genocidal maniacs. Yeah. I don't want Israel to become part of a Muslim caliphate. I don't want a Muslim caliphate to destroy all of Israel and then destroy all of Europe and then destroy the United States and then destroy everything. That's their aim. They don't want to admit defeat in kinetic war, because if they ever admit defeat in war, then guess what happens? that they have to admit that their aims have changed. And as long as psychopaths like that, who are so bent ideologically that they're unwilling to admit defeat, those particular people are not going to change their ways. And the only option then is unfortunately not going to end well, usually for them. Thank goodness. Anyway, that's also part of the lessons of loss. You need to accept defeat, including in war, not just in a democracy. And, you know, you need to find the better way forward. You can't just keep breeding generations of people who want to just kill and murder and destroy and genocide. Why medical care unaffordable in America? That's a very good question. Medical care is unaffordable in America for a lot of reasons. Unfortunately, for too many years, there was no health care for most people. So things like healthcare management organizations were allowed to bump up prices to insane levels because they had very strong lobbies. I know. I used to get paid by some of them for doing different things, like computer IT work. And they had very powerful lobbies. Nice people, wonderful people running them. But their job was to keep the medical industries from being socialized. And not socialism, Marxism. No, idiot. Socialized, as in available to all citizens. Just like healthcare is a right in every other G8 nation in the world, and more than G8 nations, in many nations around the world, healthcare is a right. Do you know why healthcare is a right? Because an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure. Literally. People live longer and healthier lives when you give them free healthcare. Your nation will have a longer average lifespan when they have not free, but effectively free or extremely low cost healthcare. It's not free because they pay for it through taxes. But people will have better health and live longer lives when you don't stress them out about medicine than when you do. But here's the thing. You want to know something else? The healthcare system in the United States is actually not all that terrible compared to many places that have socialized healthcare. What do I mean by that? I mean, there are a lot of services in the US that you can get that are simply unavailable in other places, even in some of the best places on earth for healthcare. Certain procedures, certain medicines, certain appointments, certain exams, certain tests. These things are simply not available outside of the US very easily. Now, there are some places where they'll be more available and even cheaper, but that's another story, and etc. But the US has a very complicated healthcare system. Unfortunately, it was complicated by allowing it to remain completely privatized for far too long. And in many ways it is, right? It remains very privatized. It's just that now you have more people who have access to healthcare than you've ever had before. Yay. And you have less people that don't have access than there ever were before. Yay. But the problem is that the system for doing that wasn't necessarily done very well. So you got a lot of problems. Oh well, fortunately we have a democracy. And through that democracy, we can keep making changes and improving things over time through the ballot box, not through the bullet box. Through the ballot box. Okay, folks, that's going to do it for now. This has been a far longer live stream than I thought it would be. But I wish you all a happy, prosperous, healthy, peaceful day and night and whatever time it is. See you guys. Talk to you in the next one. Cheers.